Hello, good evening, everybody. I'm Diane Sayre. This is the LaRouche Organization Friday Symposium, and it couldn't come at a more dangerous time, but also a time with great potential. And as I was looking for my Thanksgiving or inspiration and thoughts for my Thanksgiving message, I came across a Thanksgiving message from Lyndon LaRouche written 22 years ago, November 28th, 2002, entitled A Presidential Thanksgiving Message. If people remember, we were on the cusp of the war with Iraq based on a whole bunch of lies, which led to the deaths of upwards of 1 million Iraqis and ultimately 10,000 Americans, 5,000 official U.S. military, 5,000 contractors, and was one of the contributing factors to why we now have 22 soldier suicides per day. LaRouche wrote in this paper, a decades-long moral and intellectual degeneration of the political parties of the USA and Western Europe underlies the shameful degree of general failure of those nations' established parties to deal effectively with the deadliest issues of the past 2 years. The first of these is that US-led drive toward a global and virtually perpetual state of religious warfare, pushed by such voices as the combined clash of civilizations dogma of Bernard Lewis, Zbigniew Brzezinski, and Samuel P. Huntington. The second is the currently spiraling economic collapse of the utterly rotten present world monetary and financial system. Well, aren't we there today? Accepting it's not the world because you have a new dynamic in the BRICS nations, which are not collapsing in the way of the bankrupt colonial system. And what I thought was delightful later is what he says, and just to preface it, because similarly, where we are here about to march over the cliff, potentially to thermonuclear war, we are witnessing one of the most horrific genocides in human history, where you have Israel armed by the US, UK, massive superiority of force, just exterminating 2 million people in front of our eyes through bombings and starvation and torture and everything else that goes along with that. And the world remains silent. So similarly, LaRouche writes, we're in a period of world affairs comparable to 1929 through 33, but much more dangerous. If so-called democratic institutions remain as degenerated as the US parties, for example, showed themselves over the recent 2 years, especially the past year, then the likely course of world events is generalized economic disintegration and a kind of warfare reminiscent of either the 1511 through 1648, something interval in European history, or the 14th century New Dark Age. The history of Weimar Germany from the fall of the Müller government to the January 30th, 1933 appointment of Adolf Hitler as chancellor is worth revisiting for sources of insight. Now, he says, today, we in the USA should be grateful for that recent intervention of the institutions on which I placed my confidence in recent matters. However, no possible escape from a world depression is possible except through enactment of laws which nullify all of the 1971 through 2002 anti-FDR reforms and economic, monetary, and financial practices. This requires laws enacted in the Congress and the federal states as applicable. The enactment of such laws by means consistent with our Constitution requires political parties. We must create that political combination by a mission-oriented regroupment of the viable elements salvaged from the presently failed political party system. This really is very good instruction for incoming President Donald Trump in his first 100 days, if we get there, and I'll get to that in a moment. With that, what that needed regroupment must be is not yet to be seen. The starting point should be an energetic effort to assemble some bipartisan rallying behind certain specific missions. I have led in defining what is sometimes labeled a super TVA of infrastructure building to restart our collapsing national economy. However, that program requires a prerequisite clearing the terrain by a single, simply stated piece of general legislation, which states A, that we are presently gripped by a deadly emergency, a national systemic physical economic collapse for which fiscal austerity is inherently counterproductive, and B, stipulates the laws on the books which would prevent recovery programs such as those of the 1933-34 interval must be suspended for the duration of the present national economic emergency. So, really apropos for today. Now, let me just tell you something. And as people know, there was a very intense meeting of the International Peace Coalition a week ago today, followed up by a meeting today, which will be followed on the weekend of December 7th and 8th by an International Schiller Institute conference. And on December 7th, Scott Ritter has also called for a day of action and will be holding an event at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. to rally people in the nation's capital against thermonuclear war. But I wanted to just share a report from the Russian Defense Ministry about what happened last week, which people may know that on, I guess it was November 25th, the Russians deployed the Orezhnik missile, which is a new experimental missile which travels at Mach 10, against which the West has no defense thus far. They don't need nuclear warheads. The force, because of the speed, is like a meteor hitting, and it can travel deep into Earth, setting off waves underground, which are also very destructive. The only thing you're missing is the radiation. So they demonstrated their strength in that regard in response to Joe Biden, supposedly, maybe Tony Blinken, lifting the restriction on Zelensky using American-made, British-made long-range missiles to strike into Russia, which everyone in the world knows cannot be directed without American military personnel involved. And I just want to say that when the Russians responded with several attacks, they describe one situation where that dozens of technicians by the Ukrainian military intelligence headquarters, they said up to 30 specialists, including, or 40 specialists at this, they say on 25th November, as a result of the missile strike at a staff of the Kraken unit of the main Directorate of Intelligence, up to 40 foreign specialists, mainly from the USA, were eliminated. That means nearly 40 American specialists, whatever their affiliation is with the armed services or contractors or something, were killed in a Russian strike. So where is this going to lead? Will we even get to January 20th when President Trump is sworn in? Also, President Putin, in a press conference yesterday, warned that he believes that, one, he was somewhat horrified by the process of the US election, that you had not one, but two or three different assassination attempts against President Donald Trump. And he warned that he believes Trump is still in danger. And I think that's very true, given the desperation of this NATO force. And this is why people must mobilize to stop nuclear war, but also to know what the solution is and to work with us to get that. And to that end, I have asked Richard Freeman of Executive Intelligence Review, a longtime LaRouche associate, to join me here for this discussion. So I will bring him on, and there you are. So Richard, why don't you go ahead?
Great. Thanks for having me, Diane. I'm very happy to be here and be here with you. I want to just take one point that Diane's made, because what I would like to do tonight is actually to go through this report that we've done. Paul Gallagher, economics editor and one of the editors of EIR, presented some of this, but I have some of the graphics this time. And the question is, how can we do this? On what Diane related, the statement, as we've put out, that Vladimir Putin issued just a week ago, in which he said that, this is completely consistent with everything that Diane is saying, but he said, and this is just one quote, the updated version of the basic principles document, that's the principles on which Russia would engage in nuclear war or other types of war. The updated version of the basic principles document is supposed to regard an aggression against Russia from any non-nuclear state, but involving or supported by any nuclear state, as their joint attack against the Russian Federation. We will consider such a possibility once we receive reliable information about a massive launch of air and space attack weapons and their crossing our state border. And as he indicated at the time, the ATACMS, which was provided by the Americans, and the Storm Shadow missiles, the first ones were missiles too, provided by the British and others. These can, the Scalp missiles of the French, these can go into medium range to middle range into Russia, and they can hit Moscow, St. Petersburg, and potentially other places. The British and the Americans deployed these missiles and fired them. That would mean, under the Russian doctrine, that this is a joint attack. It's not just the Ukrainians, because the Ukrainians, as we pointed out on many shows of Diane's, can't do this. They have to have both permission, they have to have targeting, they have to have GPS and things like that from the Americans and the British. So the threshold was crossed. So if I could have the first slide, please. Okay, this is the new pamphlet we've just put out on a very expedited basis, researched, wrote, and put out in 10 days. It's called Development Drive. Means billions of new jobs, no refugees, no war. And the fundamental thesis of this pamphlet is that if we're going to deal with the migration crisis so that people don't die in boats crossing the Mediterranean, or the treatment that is given to certain people at the American border, and what do we do? And the answer is, if we have the type of development which is sufficient and necessary, then no one will want to try and cross the border or anything of the sort. They'll be very happy, for the most part. They can cross by legal and other means as well, but generally, if their country is developing, as we know how that can happen, then they will want to stay in their country and participate in the building of their country. If their country is being destroyed by wars, and most importantly, by genocidal economic policies, then they will want to get out. And so this is the approach to the migrant question that Helga Zepp LaRouche and the LaRouche Organization and the Schiller Institute are proposing. And it is a proposal that will work. And that's what I'm going to show you, that this is a proposal that will work. You may say, well, how can this work? We're on the verge of nuclear war. Diane just said it. I just said it. Well, that's what we're going to look at. And I will just say two things about this. Helga Zepp LaRouche today said, you're dealing with an insanity factor, not just an evil factor, but some of these people are insane. However, if we can get the United States, Germany, France, Italy to work with Russia and China and join the BRICS-centered new global majority, then we can both end the war and in that process, develop the world. And I will just show you what we're going to do, but I want to just raise to everyone the question, give up your previous economics, think on a higher plane of LaRouche economics, but also, if we do something good for humanity, developing the whole third world, Africa in particular, can that develop the American economy? Is doing something good something that will develop our economy? And the answer is yes. And we're about to show you. Okay, so if we can have the second slide, please. This just shows you all the countries that have joined the Belt and Road. There's 151 countries. That is the Chinese project for building massive infrastructure around the world. China's highlighted in red, and you can see it encompasses almost every country in Africa, most in Asia, most in Central Asia, and parts of Ibero-America. And we want the United States to be joining in that, but the larger process that encloses the Belt and Road. Next, please. Now, I just want to say something about the BRICS, which is it's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. But it's going to, it expanded this year to 9 members who were admitted in January of this year, Iran, Ethiopia, and so forth. There were 3 added, and now there's 13 new members. So this is a 22-member institution. It's primarily economic, which we'll see, as many people do know. And they are critical countries around the world. How critical? Well, this is a graphic that we put in the pamphlet, and you'll see it, of population. If the darker blue just shows just the 9 BRIC members, the 6 original and 3 that joined subsequently. And then the lighter blue are if you add the new 13 members, bringing it to 22 members of BRICS. So if you take the 2 combined, they have 57% of the world, 57% of the world population. Well, that's almost 60%. That's almost 3/5 of all the world population is in BRICS. They have 53% of the wheat. They have over 40% of the oil. You can see they close to 75% of the coal production, 75% of the steel production. The electric railroads that exist in the world, electrified rail, they include over 60%. And then you can see stocks. They don't have many. They don't have a high percentage of the stocks. That's a very healthy thing. So this is an institution. When Helga Zepp-LaRouche keeps saying we're approaching a global majority with the BRICS as the pivot, you can see why they're the pivot. If you begin from real economy, rip up anything you're thinking about economics 101 that you were unfortunately asked to take in college or whatever you got in high school or anything else. This is the reality of what we can produce for the world, and the world will reproduce itself at higher and higher levels using creativity. Next, please. Okay, now I'm going to show you 3 of the development projects that are game changers for the world. We have several of them in this pamphlet as much as we could. This is Shanghai. The country you're looking at is Peru. And this is the western part of Ibero-America facing into the Pacific Ocean. And I want you to know this because the next ones we're going to show you, just so that you can locate it in your own mind. What has happened is a few days ago, they opened up the first phase of the Shanghai port. It's a port that's about 20 miles north of Lima, the capital of Peru. It's in the water. It has a very advanced technology. Much of the work on the port is automated. The total project will be $3.5 billion. So far, $1.5 billion has been spent. And just to give you one sense of this, the project, which was run by the China Ocean Shipping Company and the Peruvian Mining Company who built this, the first phase, they're going to build all 3 phases. They can accommodate right now 1 million what's called TEUs, which are 20-foot equivalent units. These are loaded onto ships and unloaded onto shore and loaded onto trains. So TEUs is like a standard unit of measurement. It's a container that can hold that much. They will soon expand it to 3.5 million TEUs. And the point about this port, it has a maximum depth of about 17.8 meters. That's roughly 54 feet. That means it can take in the most advanced shipping work in the world. Ships, largest ships, who can offload on this dock, which everything is automated. That makes it one of the most productive ports anywhere in the world, just to start with. I think it would put it in the top 20 when it's completed. Next one, please. This is important for two purposes. Number one, if you look where it says Shanghai, and then you draw a line to Shanghai, not Shanghai, but Shanghai, China, which is a heavily industrialized city in China, as many people know, over 25 million people, but really heavily in manufacturing. This would mean that the trip, instead of going through the previous routes that exist, including the Panama Canal, will take several weeks off the trip. And therefore, you're connecting directly Europe with Ibero-America. Well, that's very good. Second point, you may see it from Shanghai, that yellow bold line. It goes up and then it goes down. And it lands in Santos. Santos is in Brazil, and it is a major port in Brazil. So what the plan is that they call it bioceanic because you'll connect the Pacific with the Atlantic. And it's a rail corridor, which will take goods straight across Ibero-America. It will feed off several countries, not just Brazil and Peru, but other Bolivia and other countries will feed off this. It's a development corridor. And if we had the brains in America, we would be building rail systems. And in 1879, I'll just mention this, our Secretary of State, Blaine, actually had a conference convened in Washington to build an entire rail system between America and Ibero-America. It's a magnificent thing. It's another story, but I just want to tell you. So this has tremendous potential. And the United States has been doing everything it can to stop this from being done. But President Xi Jinping traveled to China, to Peru, 9 days ago to inaugurate this. Next, please. So this is one of the mega projects. This just shows you around the world. This is about 17,000 kilometers, about half the diameter of the world, about 12,500 miles. So this project has a tremendous possibility. Next, please. This one is just another way of showing you. If you look at Ibero-America tilted on its side, as you would if you're looking from the North Pole, you can see the route that it will take. And again, we do show the rail routes that we would build to develop the connection between the United States and Ibero-America. But again, this will have a connection to China and will have a connection to Ibero-America. And those are two phases of tremendous development. Okay, one major project. Next, please. Now, this is the OASIS plan. This is the second major project I want to show. Many of our viewers are very, very familiar with this. You'll see that the little blue with sort of water droplets inside marks desalination plants. And also these desalination units are also in black. You can see that as well. And the idea was take water from the Mediterranean to the Dead Sea, and from the Red Sea, which you can see where Saudi Arabia is in the lower part of your picture, bordering Egypt on the other side, and also bring that to the Dead Sea. So you would have a red dead canal and a Mediterranean dead canal. And along the way, you would build nuclear power generated desalination plants. You would have pumping stations, hydroelectric power plants, possibly new cities. The new cities are slightly orange. You can see those. And what you would have in the north, not just in the north, you will see something that's off to the right, and that's a high-speed rail line that you would build in the whole area. And this would secure a peace. In other words, if you want to actually, and we can stop the deadly genocide of Netanyahu and Ben Gvir and so forth, you would want to develop not just a peace, but joint economic development, which would last 2 to 3 generations and actually bring the populations into peace by eliminating the poverty, by having them work Arab and Jews side by side, Muslims and Jews side by side, Arabs and Israelis, and you would actually develop this region as a fundamental project. Since we've covered this many times, I'm not going to go more, but this is very exciting. It's also in our pamphlet, how we're going to rebuild the world, end migration, build millions of jobs. This could create about our pamphlet, about 2 billion jobs. Next, please. Now, this one, I just want to identify for you. The country you're looking at, you may not recognize it. It's Afghanistan, one of the poorest countries of the earth, which the United States, after trying to subject it for 20 years to wars, and before that, they subjected to 20 years the wars with the Soviets and the Brzezinskis fighting the Soviets and setting up the terrorist infrastructure. This 40 years of wars, and it already has a situation where it's extraordinarily poor. What you would build, and this was actually taken up at a conference, the Commonwealth of Independent States, and then it was proposed by President Putin, who sent the head of his Security Council, whose name is Shoigu, Sergei Shoigu, who used to be the defense minister, to a special mission on the November 25th and 26th. He took a whole bevy of people. I just want to mention to you, this is a rail line. Much of it is not built. You can see, if you can detect the red is not built. The existing line, where it says the word existing line in the middle of the map, is built. If it were to be built, it would have 3 major purposes. First of all, it would connect cities in Afghanistan, like Kabul to Herat and other cities like that, which are unconnected. It would start to bring rail corridors of development to Afghanistan. And number 2, it would bring the Ainak copper ore mine, the Hajat iron ore mine, many other things that exist in Afghanistan, which are ready to go to be developed, so they can have the pariah status removed and return as 43 million people to a world civilization. But if you look at the map, this line, if you go to the eastern port of it, okay, that takes you into Pakistan, and it takes you into Karachi. And what it does is, from there, there's a China-Pakistan economic corridor, which is a major corridor for world development. If you go west, you go all the way to the end of the page. First of all, if you go a little bit, you'll see to Europe and Russia. So this would link Afghanistan to all of Europe and Russia, as you'll see in a second, through the north-south international transport route. But if you go to extremely to the west, you'll see to Chabahar. Chabahar is a port in Iran. We don't have Iran there. We don't have Pakistan. We're just showing you. But if you follow these geographically, that's where it'll go. So this trans-African railway link not only will develop Afghanistan, be crucial to it, but also link all the way up to Russia and Europe, link to Iran and further to the Gulf Sea, linked to Karachi, and all the way can go to the Indian Ocean. This is a project. It will employ tens of thousands of Afghanis. It will also need rail equipment. It will need machine tools. It will need steel plants. America and other countries, if we work with China and Russia, can build them. Next, please. Now, I'm just going to show you this last one, which will give you a sense of this. If you look at just about in the Indian Ocean, you can see, in India, between India and Africa, you'll see 2 routes. One is a route that I identified before, the Pakistan-China economic corridor, which will extend all the way to Shanghai. And if you remember the previous ones I've shown you, Shanghai will now connect to Shanghai, which by the projects that are now underway. The other way, which will go north, it shows you where the Nord Stream was, and that is the international, it says INSTC, International North-South Transport Corridor. It will go through St. Petersburg, it will go through India, it will go through Iran, it will go through Azerbaijan, all the way to the Nordic countries of Norway and so forth, and then back down, touching through Africa. This is a magnificent project which India wants, Iran wants, Russia wants, and you have a route that will be through Afghanistan as a crucial hub. So I've now shown you 3 of the crucial projects that we're showing. These are projects that can speed up transportation by 20 to 50%, cut it in half. But they will also be development corridors for all these countries involved. I'll let you read this excellent pamphlet as the next thing. So next, please. Okay, so now we're going to turn to the United States. And I'm going to show you that if we take the exports to the developing sector, global South, global majority, working with China and Russia and the BRICS, which have half the world's population, 70% of the steel and so forth, that is a piece of Westphalia. That is a peace that will be stable. That is a peace that will end the war. If we act on physical economics, as Lyndon LaRouche says, rather than pieces of paper that happen to have green or whatever color the currency is on. Now, this shows you the manufacturing employment collapse in the United States. We used to have 19.4 million. On the left side, it says thousands of manufacturing workers. So think of it where it says 20,000. 20,000 is 20 million. So these are millions. So we used to have 19.4 million manufacturing workers. And you can see in ratchet form, the devaluation, taking the dollar off the gold reserve system, which is before this chart, but Volcker measures in 1979 and other things of that sort destroyed our manufacturing. And by waves, it hits a bottom in the 2007 to 2009 collapse. You can see that. And it makes its way back up. That was 11.4 million. It adds about 1.8 million manufacturing jobs in the meantime under Trump and under President Biden. That's not much, because it still leaves us 6.5 million jobs short of where it was. And it also leaves us, this is way, way below where we can become if we adopt this LaRouche plan, as you'll see in a second. Next, please. Okay, if you back up to the first one, the one just before I go to this. Now, let me just say one thing. Let me give you an idea. I showed you all these projects, and you may be thinking, well, that's all very nice, but what the heck can the United States do? Let me just give you 4 examples of doing this. On March 5th of this year, the Nigerian Minister of Agriculture and Food Security said that Nigeria requires 72,000 tractors. They only have 5,000 tractors for a country with 234 million people. It's ridiculous. Caterpillar, which has 62 operating plants in the United States, and John Deere, which has more than 60 plants, such plants operating in the United States, could provide a portion of that. An African organization with a few Americans within it called Tractors for Africa reports that Ghana needs 30,000 tractors, and they currently only have 2,000. So there's the need, and there's a market for tractors, combines, harvesters, bulldozers, excavators, cranes, and John Deere and Caterpillar, which produce very good products, and there's other countries, could be part of that, adding tens and tens of thousands of jobs. We also reported in the world that needs 1.5 billion new productive jobs, which is a 2020 study that the EAR did, that building electric power would create 10 million jobs worldwide and would build more than 1 million jobs in the United States, construction workers, power engineers, line workers. That's another source. So if we build this international, we will build for them by shipping out power plants and so forth and know-how, and also building for ourselves another 1 million jobs. We also said in that same study, and this is referenced in what I just put out, that we will build hospitals around the world. There is now a need for hospitals in every country. I found out that you can pre-manufacture some of the hospital features, the outside walls and so forth, the teleelectronics over the beds and so forth. This would produce 100 million jobs worldwide and 6 million jobs in the United States. And then the world needs 5-axis machine tools, laser machine tools, computer numerical control lathes. It needs master machinists to teach this. America could produce these if we reopen our plants. And I'll just say this because we have a certain time we want to complete everything in, that we have shut down in America since 1998, 66,000 plants. What retooling is, just to say this, if you go to any plant, and I urge everyone to see if you live in an area where you can get a tour of a plant. The Mack truck plant has a wonderful tour in Maryland. You can go in some of the auto plants in Detroit. I did it, and so forth. When you walk in, what's there? A bunch of machine tools in an ordered configuration from a higher principle of how you're going to make the work. What LaRouche has advocated is we reconvert a good part of, let's say, half of the aerospace defense industry, but we also take these plants in the automotive industry, and these 66,000 plants, if they're still operating and they haven't been turned into, museums to show you turtles that can swim on their back or something like that, and we can get them. You just take out not the bad ones. You take out the machine tools that used to produce one thing, and you put in machine tools that can produce something else. Skilled engineers and master machinists and foremen know how to do it. They do it in the auto industry every year. They do it for the silly reason, mostly to just get a different style of, car. But we did this during World War II, where by 1943, we had shut down every auto plant and reconverted it to producing war goods. Why not produce the goods that the world needs, including other machine tools and so forth and so on? So I've just named areas, tractors, excavator, dredgers, building electrical plants around the world, building hospitals and water systems, building the machine tools and shipping them out by reconverting existing plants. That's just 4 areas. And there are others that America can develop. So we are developing the world and the good of humanity, and we are recharging our economy. And it'll work far better than any scheme that has come up by Trump or by Biden or by Obama, which are all other failures because they don't have a direction, and we have a directionality. Next, please. So I'm just going to show you that would be combined, that export orientation, which will add, I figured that we export just machinery and mechanical appliances, and this doesn't include tractors and so forth, $240 billion a year, according to the latest figures for 2023. That would quadruple to $960 billion a year. That would create millions of jobs, but it would be purposeful jobs, productive jobs, and it would create jobs in America in each of those designated areas I just mentioned. So you get jobs in America, jobs around the world, and the development of the world. Now, the second thing I'm going to show you is that would be combined with some great projects, which Diane referenced when she spoke about Lyndon LaRouche talking about a super TVA. This wouldn't just be the TVA. This is a system of America's transcontinental railroads. Lincoln had a lot to do with this, as you may know, because in 1862, he signed the Pacific Railway Act. And if you look on the map, you'll see the Central Pacific Railway, and it meets, that starts near San Francisco, and it meets the Union Pacific Railway, which started near Omaha, Nebraska, and it met at Promontory Point in Utah, near Ogden, and that was the first transcontinental railroad. It was completed in 1869. But we also built 4 other transcontinental railroads, all from the Lincoln impetus. And I'll just identify them: the Great Northern, which was completed in 1893. Below that, the Northern Pacific, 1883. The Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe, 1884. And the Southern Pacific in 1884, which was meant for reconstruction of the South. And these 5 railroads, which developed development corridors and moved goods and so forth, were the backbone of the Lincoln Economic Revolution, which started in 1861 and extended all the way through 1893 until certain features were made to try and shut that down. But it still had its effect into the 21st century. So, next, please. We propose one of the projects internally. Now, I showed you 4 external projects. We would build 42,000 miles of rail, high-speed electrified. The high-speed rail would probably travel at somewhere between 150 to 180 miles per hour. The maglev, or let's say 150 miles per hour, the maglev, and some of those you can't say by the color scheme, we left 16,000 of that to be by maglev, would be traveling at 180 to 210 miles per hour. We would connect 40 cities, all the major cities in the United States, which account for 70% of all freight traffic and 65% of all passenger rail traffic. This would be a revolution. And the freight rail maglev doesn't travel that fast, but it would travel about 105 to 110 miles per hour. The average freight travels in the United States at 42 miles per hour. Any freight train, that goes on Burlington Northern or whatever you're talking about. So it's an upgrading of about 2.5 times. You could produce something in Detroit and have it shipped to New York or Virginia by the afternoon and be worked on further. It's like a large conveyor belt for manufacturing. But what this would do, and I just want to do this as quickly as I can, it would bring forth all sorts of things. We would need 20,711 locomotives. This was an idea of Kyle Cooper, a magnificent engineer, and I worked with him for 7 years, extending the plan from 26,000 to 42,000. So we'd be built locomotives. We'd have to have catenary lines overhead to make the electrified rail connected. That's another thing. You have to build substations. There would have to be one every 40 miles. You need 1,000 of these. Those would also have step up and step down transformers to transform the electricity. You would need double tracking, which means rail. It means cement. For every a bill of material, each new mile of track, 370 tons of steel, 535 tons of cement. And you would need nuclear power, because that would be a preferred source, although you could use clean coal and natural gas as well for the power system. But this would require, we calculated, Hal and I, 50,000 megawatts of nuclear power. That would require about 50 nuclear power plants if they were each 1,000 megawatts each. This means that we would put permanent productivity. The idea of economics is not to maximize profit. It's to figure out how man's mind can conceive of advanced processes and then build that as permanent productivity into the economy, which is never going to be taken out unless we destroy it, but can be superseded. Next, please. Okay, this is the start of something called the North American and Water Project Alliance, Power Alliance. I don't want to spend a huge amount of time, but this is where it starts. You can see there's Alaska, and then there's Canada right below it. And right up at the top of the Yukon and the Tanana rivers, unfortunately, it didn't come out terribly well. You can see the ANA of the Tanana, and there's the Copper River. That water flows off into the Pacific Ocean. We would take that and build canals and trenches through Alaska, down through Canada, and then next, please. Now, this is the project. It's tilted, but it gives you a full sense. So we saw the Canada-Alaska part. It would come down into America through something called the Rocky Mountain Trench, which is a huge trench, and would use the force of gravity to go downhill, although you would have to pump some of it up to get it up there with using nuclear power and so forth. And it would fill a huge part of the United States. We would be able to get this, I think, into about 26 states. And what that would mean is we could fill up all sorts of things, like in Nebraska, the Ogallala Aquifer, which supplies a lot of water, is being depleted. It needs water. This would go into Mexico so that you would have in Mexico the water system going there. This would be pumped east. And the key thing about this is that it would bring a tremendous amount of, just looking for the figures, but if I can't find them, I won't use them. But it would build, I think it was 135 million acre feet of water every year to this 120 million acre feet per year distributed between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. It is estimated that this mega project would create 7 million jobs. And it would solve many of the water problems in the United States if we do it. Next, please. So we just saw that. Third, we propose building 150 to 500 new nuclear power plants. Now, this just shows you the number of reactors in the United States. 1991, 113. 2000, I shouldn't put 2014. That's 2024. Excuse me, my mistake. It's 93. So we've lost 18% of them. Some of the new reactors that were built in the meantime and others were retired, the installed generating capacity is not too much different. But if we need 50 nuclear reactors just for the basis of electrifying the United States, which would make a leap in technology, and we would need at least 100 to 400 more for all the other purposes. This is the basis until we develop fully fusion. This is the basis because it's a physical reaction. You're not combusting like coal or gas or oil, which burns and oxidizes, but you're splitting the atom. Next, please. This is a nuclear plant, our Arkansas Nuclear 1 power plant in Russellville, Arkansas. We would build 150 to 500 more of these types of plants. Next, please. Now, this is just called the bill of materials. It's a large volume components of one nuclear plant. 70 to 100 pumps are needed. 80 to 484 small pumps. Those first ones were large pumps. 50 to 150 tanks. I won't go through the numbers. You can see them. Heat exchangers, compressors, vacuum pumps, diesel generators, prefabricated equipment, instruments, valves, concrete, structural steel for one nuclear power plant. This is the bill of materials that Lyndon LaRouche has always known. You build something for the advancement of the economy, and you stimulate every single feature of your real economy so we can be restoring our manufacturing workforce, which alters nature, both in the form of providing things we need for our living existence, in the form of capital goods, and in the form of infrastructure products that we then install. That's why the manufacturing labor force, along with the construction labor force, the transportation labor force, the utilities labor force, and of course the agricultural labor force are considered productive by LaRouche. That's what we're going to build. Next, please. This is space, and we want to build space. This is the launch of Apollo 11. People know something about the history of that. I won't say more. Next, please. Now, if we build a space program and we build all of these other things that I'm talking about, and think now that the way we're going to solve these things are not the harebrained or actual, sometimes destructive or evil schemes that are coming out of Wall Street being transmitted into the Democratic and Republican Party. Although there is a faction in the Republicans who do want to build real things, they just don't know how to do it. But if we build for the export, as we said, and we combine that with the projects, the great projects in America, that will have the type of punch, that will have the type of power to elevate America to the next level of development and perfection. Now, we did this in 2020. I just want to show you what LaRouche proposes is in the green, 50% of the whole labor force be shifted to productive. Right now, it's only 21%. So we saw a transition through 2022, but focus on 2045. This was a 25-year plan. The productive labor force would be what you see, way greater percentage. And manufacturing would be half of that productive labor force. And then there'd be another 5% of R&D in the economy. So 55% of the economy would be for physical economic changes. The net effect of this, and the last thing I just want to say, is the net effect of this, excuse me for bending down, but I had to get this, is that you would increase the number of productive workers so that by 2045, 91.5 million workers would be in productive work. And 45.7 million, remember I said right now we have, even with the so-called slight bounce up, which is meaning very small, we have about 12.7 million manufacturing workers. We would go to 45 million manufacturing workers. That means the productive workforce and the manufacturing workforce would be quadrupled. This is a plan. This is real economics. If people want to talk about doing something that will change the economy, this plan, developing for the world, exports and the things that we can do, reopening plants and conversion, and developing these great projects, and I only mentioned some of them, this will start to turn the United States economy around as we, at the same time, pursue a new international development and security architecture.
Great. Well, thank you very much. So I want to just share with you a couple of the comments and questions that came in and see if you can respond. We have about 5 minutes.
Typical labor committee, we got one thing in the next thing.
Right. One person says, I don't like this. It's global. This is on the Shanghai port. China, they're communists. Automated. You want to say, and someone corrected her in the comments saying this, you're just repeating Western garbage propaganda. But do you have any?
Sure. Look, this is the big divide. There's a human race. The people who keep playing up the Communist Party part of China omit telling you, if you don't know it, that they have built railroads in Africa, 10,000 miles of track of things. They have ports and so on. My question to you is, we're close to Peru. We're close to other places. Why haven't we done this? The Chinese came in. The people who are telling you this want to divide the world. They want to decouple from China and Russia, and they want you to be prepared to have a war with China and Russia, which was exactly what Diane was addressing in the first part. It's the wrong approach. The Chinese can work with people. Just talk to them. They have a very strong Confucian development. So that's what I say. It really is the issue. Do you want to be in permanent blocks, which will then start launching nuclear missiles, or do you want to make a breakthrough and look at populations which would work? Xi Jinping invited Barack Obama to join in 2013, the Belt and Road. It's open to us. So is BRICS. We may not join it, but we can work with it.
Now, here's another one, which I think is useful to consider. Someone, I think from Nigeria, perhaps, writing in to say Nigeria's situation is worse than what you just mentioned. Nigeria currently faces disintegration, and there's massive corruption, extrajudicial killings. We need organizations like yours to be involved in addressing this. So what would you say to that?
I would say get in touch with us. If you've sent us an email, I would encourage you to if you can, give some contact information to Diane and myself. We'd be happy to work with you. We have a plan for Nigeria. LaRouche wrote a plan for Nigeria almost 40 years ago. And we have a plan for development of Southwest Asia, where we feature many projects for Nigeria. We're excited. By the way, these are projects, let me be very, very clear. You have genius in Africa. You have 1.5 billion people. It's almost 60% are under the age of 25. Instead of looking at this, cool, we have too many people. That's nonsense. We have potential geniuses. We are making proposals. People in Nigeria, probably like yourself and others, have been looking at proposals for 30 years. They've been waiting for the opportunity to do this. This is what we will do with the right credit system, which we won't have time for now. But this is what we will do the moment we have this. So yes, it may be worse. I am aware of certain things. I know there are certain roads in Nigeria that leave the capital, Lagos, and they just end in the middle of nowhere.
Rich, now someone's asking about our plans for Ireland.
Well, I can't say we've got it, but look, this is look, Germany, and this also, we have a one page. This thing I wrote is anything. It's called, it's the title of what we have. It's called U.S. Can Transform Itself by Helping Develop the Global South. Paul Gallagher and I worked on this. There's another section, Europe, Retool from Collapse, Restore High Productivity for World Benefit. You may be seeing that Germany's economy is collapsing. So we have people there, I won't go through everything, Germany, France, Italy, working with the Irish people that could take the capacity which is being shut down also by the Green New Deal, and reopen it and develop Ireland, which has a very proud tradition of hydropower and other developments. So yes, this thing will also take place in Europe. The key thing is to get past the mindset. Can we work with other people, China and Russia and others, to develop the global South, break the power of an oligarchy, end 500 years of colonialism and neo-colonial thinking? If we can do that, then every part of the globe will be developed by similar plans. We just don't have time for it right this second.
So thank you. Thanks for being brief. This is very exciting. I particularly liked hearing about the need for all the tractors because it becomes so obvious how developing the world benefits the United States very immediately. And there are all kinds of other benefits that we haven't even contemplated. I would like to encourage everybody watching, please visit. I posted in the comments section, schillerinstitute.com. Register. It doesn't cost anything for the December 7th and 8th conference of the Schiller Institute in the spirit of Schiller and Beethoven, all men become brethren. We have to have this future-oriented approach. It's the only solution, even as we contemplate the horrific evil being carried out by certain people within our own government, this British colonial ideology, which has to end. So, Rich, I'd like to thank you very much.
Thank you. And people can get this pamphlet. Just write into Diane. She can tell you where you can get it and so forth.
That's on the Schiller Institute website, too. It's right there. So schillerinstitute.com. And I look forward to seeing everyone next week. And I hope we make it that far. Now, every morning when we wake up still alive is a bit of a miracle. So let's keep fighting. Good night.